Hello, everybody. This is Bob Goodwin, and welcome to another Career Club LinkedIn Live. If you're not familiar with Career Club, we are helping folks like you find careers that matter to them using proven sales and marketing tools and methods. So please check us out at career.club. Also, I'd encourage you to connect with me directly on LinkedIn and follow Career Club. We are posting great content all the time and want to make sure you don't miss any of that. I want to thank my colleague, Joey, who has put this episode together. So that's fantastic. And Joey, I appreciate all of your hard work. So with that, I want to make sure we make the best use of our time because our guest today is phenomenal. Not only is he a very talented and accomplished executive, he's just one of the nicest people you're ever going to meet. And with that, let me welcome Kirk Perry. Kirk, welcome.
Thank you, Bob. I can go nowhere but down with that.
No. I'm properly setting expectations. And as the caption here shows, you're the president and CEO of IRI, and now I guess the merged entity IRI and NPD. So congratulations on the merger.
Thank you very much.
That's very exciting. I know we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But as is our tradition, Kirk, to help people kind of get to know you a little bit personally, we just do a little icebreaker section we call Rock Stab 5. So starting off, where were you born and raised?
So born and raised in Detroit, Michigan. I actually wasn't born there. I was born in Alexandria, Virginia. My dad was in the U.S. Army during the Vietnam War. So my mom and I were in Fort Belvoir, Virginia, where I was born. Grew up in Detroit, moved to Cincinnati for a couple years, late elementary school, early middle school, and then went to high school in Richmond, Indiana.
Yeah. And then the lead to follow on to that is, and where'd you go to college?
University of Cincinnati. I'm a proud Bearcat.
Go Bearcats. There you go. And a little bit about your family.
So actually the most important part of me, I've been married to my wife, Jackie. It'll be 33 years this year. We met in a Piggly Wiggly grocery store in Fairfield, Ohio, when we were 18 years old. So I just gave away my age. We have four amazing, they're not kids anymore. They're all adults. Our oldest is Carly, who's a kindergarten teacher in Northern California. Our second daughter, Corinne, ironically, is an employee of Nielsen IQ, my largest competitor. And my third is a college student football player. Actually played for the Bearcats for the last few years, but he transferred to Western Illinois, where he's playing this fall. And then my youngest, Joshua, is a freshman at the University of Michigan.
Awesome. Well, you do have a lot going on. That's cool. And I'm so sorry to hear your second daughter got disinherited. That's horrible. So
exactly. Yeah.
Now this is your career story to me is very, very interesting. So, all good Cincinnatians somehow find their way to Procter & Gamble at some point. But do you mind just sharing a little bit about your career arc?
Sure. So I probably had a different career arc than most. I grew up, my family was very blue collar. I was the first in my family to ever go to college. And so I was at the University of Cincinnati in the business school, and I had no idea what I wanted to do. And in one of my classes, I remember professor talk about Procter & Gamble, the preeminent marketing company, doing a little research. And back then there wasn't this thing called the internet that we could just pull up everything about the company. So I had to go to the library and learn about P&G.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, the library. And I remember thinking, gosh, it's local. It's this incredible company. They build general managers, which is kind of what I thought I wanted to do. But when I graduated, I had offers in banking and consulting and other industries, but I was married. I got married my senior year. And so my wife was already working. So I wanted to stay local, and it was P&G. So I was one of the few, the proud, the undergrads in marketing at P&G. And, I always had this, people call it the imposter syndrome. Maybe it was an inferiority complex, but I didn't feel like I belonged to that first year. But I had a guy who I had lunch with 6 months in. His name was JD Weir. He was a undergrad from Iowa and an MBA from Harvard. We were having lunch one day. He said, how do you like it? I said, well, if I can be honest with you, I'm a little nervous. I look at you with your MBA, and he said, Kirk, we are nervous. We, being MBAs, are nervous of you because, 20% of the hires here are undergrads, and 20% of that 20% are state school undergrads. And you're one of that, 4% that get hired in that's a state school undergrad. You didn't have to pay for 2 years of an MBA. You didn't have to, work for 2 years. And you came straight here. So we're nervous about you. I'm like, it totally flipped my thinking.
That's cool.
And so it gave me this confidence that I didn't have before. And so I was a marketer, 7 years in the US, and I got promoted into marketing director in Korea, spent 3 years in South Korea, then 3 years in Japan, where I was promoted in Japan to general manager, and came back to run the U.S. baby care business in 2003. Did that for 5 years, then went on to run the U.S. MDO called Strategy and Operations Group, which led me to kind of my next career move. But and then I was the president of the global family care business my last few years at the company. And then there's a very interesting opportunity. Google came knocking, and they wanted me to create an organization within Google to really tap into this large global advertising base, both client and agencies. They didn't have people that spoke that language. And so they said, hey, we want to build an organization. And I had a small list of 3 or 4 companies that I said, hey, if these companies ever reach out, I'll at least have a conversation with them. And we love Cincinnati. In fact, we're moving back this week after 8.5 years in California. We love Cincinnati. Our family was here. Our faith community was here. All the things that are important to us were here. But we just felt led to go and led to this opportunity at Google. And it was a really rough first year. I tell people probably one of the hardest years of my career, starting over again, new industry, new company. I mean, everything was different. But through challenge comes growth. And so I felt like I had this unbelievable opportunity to shape something different. And I learned a lot that helped me significantly even to this day. And I did that for almost 8 years. And then I was planning on moving back to Cincinnati, writing books, public speaking, coaching high school football. And I got a call from IRI. And it just so happened the board members were former boss and colleague at P&G, and told me about the opportunity. And I didn't aspire, honestly, to be a CEO, but it was such an intriguing opportunity in industry that I thought was ripe for major discontinuity. And I thought, you know what, that's something that maybe would be the pinnacle, kind of hang my shingle, last stop on my career move. And here we are. A year and a half later.
No, very cool. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But I'm glad that you shared all of that, because there's so many lessons even in what you just shared in terms of like state school and feeling inferior and those kinds of things. And it can be. I'm showing off my Tennessee degree on the wall, so my empathy level's high. but the other thing that you said that really gravitated to was with challenge, comes opportunity and growth. Right. And embracing that attitude. And I know we're going to talk about that in a bit. Where do we find you when you're, you have 4 grown kids and have a lot going on, but what do we find you doing when you're not at work and doing worky stuff? Yeah.
So one of my passions is coaching. I coached youth sports for 20 years, and, coaches in sports really helped me develop into who I am today. And so I feel this pay it forward attitude in coaching. And I figured this out the other day, 32 different teams in 3 countries in five different sports over 20 years. And it was so much fun. So all of my free time until about 4 years ago was coaching. And so when my youngest got to high school, those days were over, but I'm going to re-engage in that now. But when I am I'm a huge believer in nonprofit, actively involved at the University of Cincinnati on the foundation board there and with the athletic department. I also am a big believer in, cultivating a strong faith. So I spend time outside of, my work day and everything else I do, really connecting with my maker. And then the other thing that I love to do is learn. So I'm an avid reader, podcast listener. And I say, if I don't learn something new every day, I've failed as a human being, because I think we were designed to learn. And so I really do try to learn something every single day about something that I'm not familiar with. So I do strive to do that. Not every single day. I fall short of that, but I do try to do that.
No, it's definitely a worthy aspiration. So I know somebody's going to ask, can you maybe give a couple book recommendations or podcast recommendations?
So 2 podcasts that I listen to faithfully, Huberman Labs. Andrew Huberman is a neurobiology professor at Stanford. Fascinating podcast. Now, you have to be heavily invested, because they're, 60 to 90 minute long podcast.
Okay.
So you got to really be devoted, but it's super interesting. Performance, mental acuity, things like that. I really, really like that. The other one is a really good friend of mine. His name's Brian Tome. He has a podcast called The Aggressive Life, which he's got people from all walks of life and professions that really open up their souls and talk about things that, they're doing to be aggressive in their life, which I'm a big believer in. It's not about like manly aggression, but how do you make bold moves for helping others, for helping yourself. So I love that. I'm also, I love nonfiction reading. So I'm probably going to bore people with my choices, but, and especially historical nonfiction. So I read all that I can on history. And so I finished recently Teddy Rex about Teddy Roosevelt, which was a phenomenal book, and Founding Brothers was another recent one that I loved. And of course, when I saw Hamilton, I've read that Ron Chernow book. It's about this thick, and I've read it twice because it was just amazing. So
those are good choices. I'm sure you saw David McCullough pass recently.
I did.
One of my favorite storytellers.
Amazing.
Yeah, so I have to ask you a question. I was actually a guest on a podcast the other day, and it was, who's your favorite historical person? Do you have one or two?
My wife was just asking me this the other day. She's like, you read all this, like who is the person that you would like? And I think for me, actually, I've evolved. I used to think like, George Washington, Abraham Lincoln. But the more I learn about him, Teddy Roosevelt. Like, he was in that in between, right? There was no Civil War. There was no founding of the nation. There was no World War II. It's kind of this in between. But a lot of the things today, strong military, like he developed the Navy as it is today. Like he made the bold move to invest in that. Regulation, like of business. Like he took the monopolies of the day, the railroads and the oil companies, and created the, kind of the today antitrust world that we live in, which I think is great for, when we think about our entrepreneurial economy. I believe it started with him. I think the other thing he did was he was very progressive, and I think it gets a bad rap today, progressivism. He basically said, look, how do we make this a better place to live? How do we raise the living standard of everyone? So unions came into the fore. I'm not we can debate unions, but at the time they were necessary because the way workers were treated in this country. He created national parks. He was a big outdoorsman. I mean, the dude was like a Renaissance man before Renaissance men. Right. So I'm fascinated by him right now. Alexander Hamilton's the other one. If I could have an hour with someone historically, it'd be him. Like just where he came from, and I empathize with that in terms of where he came from and what he did and how he helped shape the banking system in this country and the structure of government. I've read I sound like a total nerd, but I've read the Federalist Papers multiple times, and just understand the logic that went into the underpinnings of our government it should be required reading for every U.S. citizen. Like, if you want to vote, you should have to read every Federalist paper, like understand what the intention of the founders was in terms of what they want, what they wanted this country to be.
No, we could probably riff on this because I love that whole history. No, because I love all of it too. So, I love your choices too, by the way, and the reasons for your choices. So what I thought we could do, if we can transition for a minute, is, you've made the decision to go lead IRI, and, the insights and analytics space continues to go through a lot of change, and pretty rapidly. For a long time, there was a duopoly, right, of Nielsen and IRI, and kind of trading blows with that. And I'm an ex-IRI person, so an alum, but I'm also an alum of NPD, and so I know those guys really well, and love all my ex-colleagues at NPD. But there's been a lot of change that's happened. Nielsen and GfK, you guys in NPD, Numerator and Kantar, and I'm probably forgetting some. What's going on in the industry right now that's causing all this?
So there's a seismic shift in a number of ways in the data and analytics industry, and driven by a couple of macro factors. One is the proliferation of data. When we kind of early in our careers started, I would get my fact book from IRI that was like this thick. It was a 3-ring binder, and I'd get a load of them dropped on my desk the first Monday of the month. And I'd go through and I'd create all these, pivot tables before there were pivot tables on Lotus 1-2-3 spreadsheets, and manipulate. And I was the data and analytics expert on my brand, which is scary to say out loud, but I was the data and analytics expert on the Crest brand when I first started. So we were always wanting more data. Today, you could argue there's too much data, right? It isn't a question of like it's all there, but it's being able to utilize it in a way which allows you to make effective decisions, which ultimately grows your business, right? That's what you're trying. That's the end game of utilization of data and better connection to your consumers. The second thing that's happening is the whole move toward privacy and the implications for that for businesses. So back in the day, the first models of marketing were what I would call affectionately spray and pray, like GRPs. What's my reach times frequency, and I get gross ratings points, and I'm just going to blast out my message on 3 networks, and I'm going to reach 92% of America on Sunday nights during ABC's Wild Kingdom or whatever was on. And, that's how you marketed, right? And what's happened now is the proliferation of digital. And, having spent almost 8 years at Google, the dollars that shifted from TV into digital because it was much more personalized. But what's happened now with GDPR in Europe, the General Data Protection Regulations, privacy regulations, and then CCPA in the United States, which is the California Consumer Protection Act, those are coming together to create a world where users, as they should, have complete control over their data.
Yeah.
However, major implications for advertisers, because how do you effectively target and reach someone efficiently that you can't get access to their data? And the wheels are already, Europe's done with GDPR and the US is moving there, and Apple led the way with their, non-tracking clause as part of any app that's on their ecosystem. So, they ask you, all of us, for a year, every time we'd open an app and say, do you want this app not to track you? And 98% of people said, yes, I don't want it to track me, or no, please let it track me. But 98% of people said no. So those two forces, lots of data and privacy, are coming together. And so what that means for our industry is we need to be the partner for these companies, because it's data science at its core, it's machine learning, it's artificial intelligence, and it's bringing together deep industry knowledge with technology in a privacy-centric world that allows the partners of ours to have the best, fastest access to data. If they can use that and effectively utilize that in growing their business, then we're going to be the partner of choice. The other dynamic in this industry in particular is 10, 15 years ago, the commercial reassurance industry looked a lot like the current data and analytics industry. There were multiple players, private equity backed, all over the world. And then what happened over a decade is Marsh McLennan and Aon consolidated the industry. And now you have these two large global players that really are the core players in that industry. And that's what's happening right now in our industry as companies come in. And you're right, it was IRI and Nielsen for the longest time. However, other players have come to the fore. And what's happening is, how do you connect these in the most efficient and effective way, these companies, so that the advertising partners can connect all the data dots? And so the company that allows that to happen, and for us, in our case, the marriage with NPD is a foundational change for us. So the way to think about our business is we partner with retailers with their data, and we connect them to CPG in the consumer packages. And so think L'Oreal, Unilever, Procter & Gamble, Clorox, and the like. We connect those two companies. On the NPD side, they do it with all the general merchandise categories. So think of apparel, toys, sporting goods, electronics, and also food service is another component of that business. By combining, we give a total store view, which is unprecedented in the industry. So what that means is, for Procter & Gamble, typically they could look at their categories within just the CPG space with Nielsen or IRI. Now, why that's important to, let's say, a baby care. Baby care can look at their category at P&G and understand what's happening there, maybe across, laundry and other categories that P&G tracks. But now baby care can look across the entire store and say, what's happening in hard lines in baby care? Like, if you start seeing more cribs being sold, that's a pretty good indicator that more parents are coming through the door of that retailer. What that means for my business then is that I better gear up for growth there, or potentially different products. So it gives you a total store look. The other thing it will give our partners is what I call a more complete share of wallet look. So in other words, today with IRI, we're previous to the NPD merger, our partners would be able to have a really good look at a CPG consumer as they trade between categories in the consumer packaged goods industry, food and hard lines and so on. Today, that share of wallet will look across the whole store. So what that means is you get a more complete picture of the consumer that will allow the advertisers to be really, really clear about who they're targeting and who they're not targeting. And by the way, targeting isn't meant to be a negative word. It just means those with a propensity. I mean, for one, I'm a lover of advertising, especially good advertising that's appropriately targeted. What drives me crazy is when I get something, an ad for singles over 50. Like, I'm over 50, but I'm clearly not single. You've been married a long time. But I'm like, that's totally irrelevant to me. Age is right, but you got the wrong psychographics, like I'm married. Mm-hmm. Things like that, that's what drives people. People hate bad advertising and they hate mistargeted advertising.
Yep.
But when you ask a consumer, are you willing to pay for an ad-free experience? 95% of consumers say no. So the whole value equation on the free and open web says, hey, you know what? I get this for free in exchange for me targeting you with appropriate advertising. And I think so there's a value equation connection between the consumer and the industry. And we help enable that. And the share of wallet will enable the advertisers to find the consumer across the entire store, which will help retailers and help CPG partners. And then the last one we talk about that's a huge value in our merger is a share of stomach. So there are billions of eating occasions across this country every year. And so if you have a look at what people buy in a store, but don't have a look at what they eat out, then you have an incomplete picture of the consumer. Today, NPD has an incredible out-of-home measurement service, both with a diary panel and a scan panel. And we have the same on our side at a store level. You combine those assets and you have a really, really clear picture of a consumer share of stomach. So those are the things in the industry. I've just taken you through a sweeping view of that in about 8 minutes, Bob. Sorry. But that's what, and what drew me to IRI is we have this incredible technology called liquid data, which you were employed there. But it's a disaggregated database that allows us to take any dimension of data, meaning whether it's, in one hierarchy, meaning this is how a customer would look at their data or a retailer would look at that. We can dump that all into a privacy-centric platform that allows the manipulation of that data and the ability to look at share, to look at a consumer across anything versus it being just, we call an aggregated database. It means you just get a report. Like if an advertiser said to name your company, well, I want to put my data in, and they'd spit back out a report in an aggregated way. Whereas our platform can customize. It can be as formatted or as customizable as you could possibly want or need. So I'm a big believer that as a marketer, by training, you have to have a point of difference. And so one of the things that drew me to IRI was this clear point of difference that we had. Technology in and of itself, for technology's sake, doesn't matter. You can have really cool technology that no one's interested. Case in point, Google Glass. Great technology. As my then 13-year-old son said, Dad, you know what those are? Those are female repellents. But, it's great technology, but the use case wasn't clear. And I think that's what, you got to have the foundational elements that allow that to make a difference in technology. And so we have a great technological platform.
Well, I think, too, just kind of drawing on your Procter experience, it's all about finding an unmet consumer need, or in your case, an unmet customer need. And with the proliferation of data, to your earlier point, there's like maybe too much data, right? And so how do we make sense out of it? And, liquid data has been around for 20 years, maybe. I mean,
15. Yeah, it's been
around for a long time, and was ahead of its time, probably in a lot of ways.
Yep.
But now, to be that central repository and take in all these different pipes of data, and again, not just to have data, but to actually be able to make better decisions and be able to use data in creative ways, is pretty powerful. But it's, to your point about technology for technology's sake, the use cases now are becoming really, really apparent. To be able to take advantage of the robustness of that technology. One more kind of industry question. Um, as you guys think about working with the CPGs and now general merchandise folks as well, to your point, but think about working with the manufacturers, the brands, the retailers. Where do you see the greatest either misses or opportunities for them to collaborate better?
Yeah, so it's very interesting in the industry, and I didn't appreciate the nuance of this until I came to IRI, because I was out of the CPG industry for almost 8 years. So one of the ways, the foundational data we have is point of sale data. So think of all the aggregated point of sale data in a retailer's universe, all comes together. This is where a company then goes, oh, my Pampers share is X or Y, and I can look at that by region. This is point of sale data. Then you have something called EPOS data, which is basically your online shipments with those. So you get how am I doing with these retailers online? But then there's something that we have called named account data. So the point of sale data is up here, if you will. Then the next level is named account data. So this would be a pipe between a retailer, so say Kroger, to Procter and Gamble. This would allow P&G to see the data from Kroger in their hierarchy, meaning, Kroger or P&G thinks of laundry in this way and home care in this way and family care in this way. They look at that lens at Kroger and say, okay, this is how I'm doing based on how I think about it. About 4.5 years ago, we created something called a retailer gateway. So this would be the pipe from Kroger that's based on their hierarchy. And the reason that's important, if you're a PepsiCo, you might think of carbonated beverages in your hierarchy the way you do, but Kroger might think about it totally differently. Yeah. You might have 3 buyers of carbonate. It could be alcohol, it could be in refrigerated, it could be on the aisle. You could have 3 different buyers buying from Pepsi. Wouldn't it be interesting for Pepsi to be able to look at that hierarchy through the retailer's lens? So that explanation is all about sometimes the biggest opportunity is to talk the same language. Because I can remember as a general manager, president, brand manager even of my businesses at P&G, when I would go in to talk to a merchant at Walmart or Target or Kroger or Costco or Sainsbury or whomever globally, sometimes you talk past each other because you're working off of different hierarchies and data sets. Mm-hmm. And when you come together and you bring the data in the same platform, look at it the same way, it's amazing the breakthroughs. Because when you start looking at things from the same lens, you start looking at things from an opportunity standpoint very differently. And I think that is the biggest opportunity that retailers and CPG partners have, is to get on the same wavelength in terms of how you look at different categories, because then it changes potentially. And I'll give you one example from my P&G days. Used to drive my manufacturing leaders nuts when Walmart or someone would come to us and ask for a unique SKU. And they'd say, look, we'd like to have something that, we're not going to have to comp down. Like, we don't want to have to drop, like, we don't want to drain the profitability in this category. Please give us one unique SKU that not everybody's going to merchandise down. The old $5.99 Tide days, right? So Walmart would drop the price to $5. It would just blow up the market and they'd sell a lot of it, but P&G didn't make money. Walmart, who's making money? Nobody. And so the idea would be, hey, how do we optimize our merchandising on something that's unique to our it's not unlike what TV manufacturers do. When you buy a TV from Costco versus Best Buy versus, online at Amazon, they all have the same item with different SKU numbers because they have a button difference or they have, a widget difference on the TV. It makes no consumer difference in the experience, but they're just trying to create, something that they don't have to comp down on. So anyway, all that to say, I can remember sitting and trying to convince my manufacturing leaders, like, oh my God, why do we have to do this? This is unprofitable. It's not that big. It hurts our center lines. Our cycle times are longer. But then when name your client would have it on their shelf, they would be so happy with it that when you had an eventual blip in the business and you're struggling, you could point to the fact that you had this unique SKU to them. You were talking on the same wavelength. You had, this common vision of what you wanted to do in a category. What they wanted to do is not destroy category profitability, have something unique. We spoke the same language. And I think that's the greatest opportunity right now with all of this data, with all of these opportunities in the marketplace, with pressure macroeconomically on everyone right now because of supply chain, because of inflation, pending recessions, all of these things, being able to speak the same language and look at the data through the same lens will make a world of difference.
No, super, super helpful. And just on that last point, like with the versioning that you're kind of referencing, and that building in the equity, kind of goodwill, the trust level that starts to create, because that really does seem in all relationships, right? It does kind of come down to trust.
Yeah.
When you lean into that relationship and say, hey, look, we know this is a little harder for us, but you're important to us, and we're going to do this because it's good for you. And it really is becoming that, client-centric mentality that will win the day ultimately. Otherwise, as you said, it becomes a race to the bottom and nobody wins.
Yeah, if you're simply, to use the industry parlance, if you're a vendor, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
If you're a partner, you're in the right place, because I over the course of my career, I've had plenty of vendors, and I even hate that term because somehow it means, it's kind of icky, right? I'm a vendor. What does that mean exactly? But if I'm a partner, if I'm truly partnering, that implies like we're trying to do the same thing together. It's not a binary, I win, you lose, or vice versa. We're trying to win together. And there's nothing wrong with winning together. In fact, it's exactly where, we should be, right? Each business should be benefiting the other. If I tell our teams all the time, and I said this at Google, I said this at P&G, if we're not helping our partners grow their business, we're not partners. Like they can find anybody to not grow their business. Like anybody can do that. But if we can uniquely add value by helping them grow, I mean, think about it as consumers. Who do you want to do business with? I was at a Valvoline. We're just back in Cincinnati, and I had to get my oil changed on my car, and went to this Valvoline. I'm going to do a free advertisement here at the corner of Edwards and over by Rookwood. What's Edwards and I don't know what the Edwards and
is it Madison?
Edward, thank you. Edwards and Madison. Thank you very much. Yes, Edwards and Madison. And it was the best, it sounds weird, the best oil change experience I've ever had. The most professional crew. Those guys were like so courteous, so professional. I told my wife, I said, I am going to write a review about them. I'm going to take every single car back to that place. They were like including me in the experience. They weren't trying to sell me stuff. They were genuinely seemed concerned about making me have a great experience, which was odd. And another one, I went to go get my license changed and I looked up ratings online for license bureaus in the city of Cincinnati, and the Norwood license, or whatever you call it, title and license agent, whatever they're called, the Bureau of Motor Vehicles. Sorry. They had like a 4.8 rating. I'm like, this can't be right. But they had like 500 ratings. So I went in. It was unbelievable. I was getting my license changed over. I was, in California, when I went in, they'd be like, nope, don't have this document. Leave, go. We'll see you 2 days from now when you get an appointment. They were bending over backwards to make sure I had everything. I mean, it was an unreal experience. And I'm going to go back. I just went there again yesterday to get license plates on my son's car. But again, I think about those experiences as a consumer, and how can I do that with my partners? How do I have them feel the same way when they interact with whatever company, today it's IRI, it used to be Google, it would be P&G. Like, how do I make them feel the way I felt in those two experiences? So they want to lean into me because every partnership has the inevitable dip, right? So how do we nip that dip? Because we have a great partnership and we're able to really move things forward. And it's invaluable if you have it.
Was that on the fly, nip the dip?
Well, it was an expression we used to use at P&G. Whenever we would do a restructuring, there would always be a dip in the business because people are learning their jobs. And so we used to have this rallying cry. Whenever we restructure, be like, we got to nip the dip. We've got to get it up and to the right quicker.
Well, we'll move on. But I really like your examples because, if we were in the oil changing business, or heaven forbid, the BMV, it's like, dude, really? Find a more pedestrian business to be in that's not cool or interesting or strategic. And you walk away as a raving net promoter.
Yeah.
From those. Exactly. That's cool. So maybe this is a good enough transition period here, but one of the things that I just love the most about you is, the culture, kind of qualities that you really value. And I think that you're a person, you talked about your faith earlier. I think that you're very in tune with your values and your convictions and really kind of what guides you. And so as you think about setting company culture, you've been at IRI now, what, 14, 15 months?
Yep. A little like 16, 17. Yeah, but right in that ballpark. Yep.
I'm within the margin of error.
You
But, now with NPD, and I know the NPD culture, that's a different animal, right? And now whatever the new thing will be its own entity, right? As it should be. It's not going to be 1 + 1. It's going to be 1 + 1 is 3 kind of a thing. What are some of the things that either from your personal life inform what you hope the culture becomes, or from your professional life, what you've really seen? What do you hope to make the culture?
Yeah. So I believe to my core, if you have a great culture, that it sustains you in ways that you cannot even understand or fathom in the moment. And the reason I say that is I've had a couple experiences in my career where, I was in South Korea, and I got there right as the Asian currencies were collapsing. Perfect timing. The Korean won was, when I arrived in June of 97, I think it was like 870. By Christmas, it was almost 2000. I mean, it had just collapsed. It just collapsed. And I mean, we were flipping paper over in the printer to print the backside of it. I mean, people were turning the heat off in Seoul, Korea in the winter to save money. I've never experienced anything like it in the business world, but I was amazed by how the employees rallied together, like they were in it together. Part of that was just the uniqueness of the Korean culture. The other part was the P&G culture around, we serve each other. We serve our clients. Like, how do we get to, like, there was always this thing at the end. We knew where our goal was. There might be an obstacle here, but we're going to figure out how to stay on target for that goal. So it was this incredible, that was one. Another one was, when I was in baby care, we had a rough year in 2005. Like, we took pricing, nobody followed. My old colleagues would tell you incredible war stories from there, but we had a dip. We had a dip year, flat year, basically. And I remember at the end of that year, I thought, man, our culture survey is going to be a train wreck, because it was a hard year. We grounded out all year. It was the best culture scores we had in years. And it was because we built that culture for that moment, right? It's easy to be like, oh, I love this place when it's up and to the right. Oh, I love it. It's great. People treat us with respect. But man, the minute things go south, it's like a mass exodus. Like, oh my gosh, I hate this place. So the seeing those scores reinforced to me how critical culture is and what you do. And what a culture really is, it's attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors we collectively share, right? That's what culture is. At the end of the day, there's a lot of literature on it, but I boil it down into the attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors toward each other that we collectively share. But underpinning all of that are values. Like, if you strip everything away, who are we? What do we stand for? Even in the darkest of times, like, what are we about? For example, we went through this exercise when I came to IRI. We didn't have anything written down about what our culture was. So I said, hey, let's talk to our employees. Let's talk to our clients. Let's figure out, like, what do they think we stand for? It was interesting. Regardless of the country, regardless of the function, regardless of the vertical, very similar themes popped up. And then, so we kind of laid those out. And then we said, hey, what do we want to be? Like, what are those values we want to hold dear? So, like, one of them that's really important to me is servant leadership. Yes. Ken Blanchard said in his, he's 1 Minute Manager fame, he talks about the fact that, servant leaders don't think less of themselves. They just think of themselves less. And I love that, because that's what I want a culture to be, is people who don't think less of themselves. They just think of themselves less. And one of the stories I tell about that is when I joined P&G, or when I became a general manager at P&G, we used to have these monthly letters that we would write to the CEO. Like, here's what's going on in my business. And so one of the recommendations of my boss at the time was my first trip back to the US, a 14-hour flight from Japan, print out every GM letter and read every one of them and just get a feel for the different styles and who's writing what and how the businesses are. So I did that. And I'm about like 50 of 150 into this stack. And I noticed a really interesting dichotomy. There was what I call the we's, all about what we're doing, about great employees in the organization, about all these cool things that people are doing other than the person writing the note. And then the I's. Let me tell you what I'm doing. Let me tell you what I've been thinking about. Let me tell you what I'm worried about. It was very I-centric. I'm like, So I started like, putting them, and it was probably 85 we and 15 I. Within 5 years, every one of the I's was gone. Everyone. So I believe that if you're not there to serve others, eventually you get rooted out. You find the exit. Now, anybody can make it in the short term, and people get to a certain position. Like, in hindsight, how did they get there? But they got there because someone let them get there, but they eventually, either the employees will root them out, or management will root them out, or the board will root them out. Mm-hmm. So like servant leadership is one of the core values that is at NPD, it's at IRI that we want to embody. Integrity sounds so cliche and traditional, like, integrity, but it's doing the right thing even when no one is watching you, right? It's doing that thing which is always right. And sometimes that doesn't feel great financially. It hurts in the short term, but in the long term, it's always the right thing to do, even if it inflicts some short-term pain. But there are situations in every company, right? No company sets out to say, we're not going to be full of integrity, but something happens along the way that causes them to slip. Enron, WorldCom, go down the list of companies that have had a major moral failing, and it's because they didn't police that fundamental thing. So we went through this exercise of what are the right values and put those together. And interestingly, very common between IRI and NPD. Then the other thing is we put together this how we work. Things like trust the intent, challenge the impact, right? So meaning assume everyone has pure intent. Like 99.9% of the time, everyone has pure intent. If you even took that one step further in our culture, it isn't the right is right or wrong, or the left is right or wrong. Like if we started from the premise of their worldview is different and their intent is like, let's assume their intent is right. Let's challenge the impact of what they're saying or doing. Like it should be about the impact, not about the intent, is one. Another one is that we talk about in the ways we work together is that we strive for work-life balance. Meaning, hey, don't send 5 emails on Saturday because that person's going to want to reply to you, or that things like that. So I'm sorry, I'm going to cut it off here, but culture, in my mind, is getting the values right, and then repetition does not spoil the prayer. As often as we can, talk about what our values are, and that P&G put together. John Pepper in the mid to late 80s said, "Man, we've been around for 150 years as a company. We have all of these things that we stand for, but none of it's written down." So John wrote the purpose, values, and principles that I can tell you, like almost verbatim, and I've been gone for 10 years, what those are. And it's because every term we carried our little cards around, but people told stories about it. Like, and storytelling is the way to make things stick. And so bringing these values to life at P&G or at Google or at IRI, the more we talk about them, the more they become ingrained, and people start to behave better because they're there. And then the ways we work, it gives you license to say, hey, I didn't respond to your email on Saturday because we promised each other we wouldn't be doing that. Or, I trust your intent here. I know you're not doing something nefarious, but I just disagree with it because of X, Y, or Z on the impact.
Yes.
Things like that can be self-reinforcing mechanisms as we bring two companies together, is writing it down and being clear about expectations. People either rise to your greatest expectations or they sink to your lowest. And I'm a believer that if you raise up the bar, people will rise to it. They will not sink.
No, I love that. Just very quickly on you kind of around culture. We recently did an interview with Johnny Taylor, who's the CEO of SHRM, which is the largest human resources organization. So, I believe Evan's probably a member of SHRM.
Yep.
And we were talking about diverse workforces. And with diversity, you get diversity. And so not everybody believes and values the same things. And to your point, we don't even have to assess right or wrong or better or worse. It's just different,
yep.
Based on all kinds of factors. And what I thought Johnny said that was so instructive was that we're not always going to agree on everything, but we can be respectful and we can be civil. Mm-hmm. So we don't have to be mean, and we don't have to troll people, and we don't have to gossip, and we don't have to do things that ultimately are toxic to a culture, right? Because now we're tearing each other down, not building each other up. And so just as you're talking, that kind of came to my mind, I think reinforces some of the things that you're talking about.
For sure.
So I want to talk just for a minute, because this is Career Club, and we do talk about talent and what people do in their careers. You've had the real benefit of being associated with 3 world-class organizations. And to your initial point about whether it's state school or Harvard MBA and everything in between, the way I say it is, you can't teach tall, strong, and fast. I mean, you kind of come to the party with some of this. I can teach you how to be a tight end, or I can teach you how to be a linebacker, because you might be good at one or both of those things, but I can't make you tall, strong, or fast. Mm-hmm. So what are some of the talent, and these may be character qualities, but what are some of the things that you look for that really catch your eye?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I would tell you, I had a boss once, Harry Campbell, who used to tell us, hire for attitude, train for skill. And I remember that very distinctly, because, someone's sort of attitude in terms of how they approach the job, because you're going to have days, my wife and I joke all the time, we love each other every day, but we don't always like each other. And love is a choice. So when you walk into your day-to-day, you have to choose to want to love it that day, even when the inevitable down days occur. I had bad P&G days, I had bad Google days, and I had bad IRI days. That is inevitable in a career. It's your ability to get through that, to find the up and to the right. And, sometimes you've got to think it before you can be it. Because sometimes it isn't fun. It isn't good, but you've got to imagine when it will be. I know that sounds platitudinal, but I find that when I find people with incredible attitudes, and you know what, they have the ability to learn things, they almost always work out better in the end for me than finding a genius with a bad attitude. And I've had people in the organization who are the brightest, talented people with crappy attitudes. And I can tell you, they did not last long in my organization. Like, I want people who are as equally skilled in the EQ side as in the IQ side. And that's where to me, the attitude piece comes from. The other thing that is core to me when I interview people is resiliency. Yes. There is, and it's, it's really come into vogue in the last 5 years. I think, what's her name? Brene Brown, when she talks about, grit. That Angela Duckworth, I think, wrote the book on grit, but Brene Brown talks about resiliency and fighting through things. But I always ask a question when I interview people. Tell me about the most challenging thing you've ever been through. Could be personal or professional, and how you dealt with it and how it's affected you today and how you operate. You would be amazed at the number of people that simply cannot answer that question. And that to me is a disqualifier, because if you haven't had to fight through something, if you haven't had to gut something out to get to the other side, you're probably not going to make it in a tough business world. I mean, you might be successful, you might be, but odds are, if you haven't had to battle through something in your life, then you are going to struggle with the day-to-day, hand-to-hand combat of business. Because in a lot of cases, that's what it is. Who wants it more? There's plenty of talented companies out there, but like sports, who wants it more? And I think that's about resiliency. So, attitude, resiliency. And the other one is, and my grandmother used to say to me when I was a little kid, I'm like, what is she talking about? So 3 things people can never take away from you: experience, education, and memories. And I think about that a lot. Like, you can have all the stuff in the world, but it can be taken away tomorrow. It's your experience, your education, your memories. So my wife and I, with our kids, have always had a goal of giving our kids incredible experiences and great education and wonderful memories. That's been as parents, like, forget all the stuff. Like, we want them to have these things in their mind that they do for their kids and so on. We want to change the trajectory of our families. But I think from a business perspective, the experience part to me is so critically important. I want to have someone with a diversity of experiences, someone who takes that job in Korea as a 31-year-old. Like, I want someone who's willing to take that. And I can tell you what's interesting for me. I sit on 2 publicly traded company boards, Smuckers and Elf Cosmetics. And I also just recently joined the board of Chick-fil-A. And Chick-fil-A obviously is a privately held company. It's a family company that, they've done an amazing job in the last 20 years of building an incredible brand. But the reason these boards wanted me wasn't because I'm better than other candidates out there, because I've had these incredible experiences. I had CPG. I spent 6 years abroad, took chances. Not many people. In fact, I told you the story. The reason I ended up in Korea was because David Taylor turned that job down. So I was joking with David, you're the reason I am where I am today, because you turned that job down. Because if you'd have taken it, then I would have probably stayed in the US or gone to Europe. And it was Korea that fundamentally changed my career trajectory. But it's my experience based then. And then I took a chance mid-career to go to Google. I had a shot to eventually lead P&G, as a few other people did. But I said, you know what? I only get one time to go around here. I'm going to take a risk. Mm-hmm. And what's the worst thing that can happen? I'd have P&G and Google on my resume. And that first year, there were many days where I'm like, I'm going to have a resume with Google on it and something else soon, because this isn't going the way I thought it would. But then, and then that led to IRI, that because IRI said, wow, Kirk's got tech and CPG and great up. So I've taken these risks in my career and I've had to fight through things. It hasn't been easy. It hasn't been. In the last year is a great example. Came to run the company. And as soon as I got in there, we were having offers from SPACs to go public, and other companies were looking at us. We were looking at other companies. And then this came in with NPD. And it's just been, I've gotten a PhD, I joke, in private equity over the last year about, and I didn't sign up. I didn't say I'm going to go learn about, I wanted to run a company. And so I spent more than half my time, not only running the company, but, landing this merger. So I think, as boards, employers, other people want to see these experiences. And so those are the three: experiences, resiliency, and this notion. Yeah. So that's what I want to, high EQ. That's what I want to find in people.
Yeah. So we've just seen a couple of articles here recently. Somebody that we had on a couple months ago is Professor Joe Fuller from Harvard Business School. And he leads their Managing the Future of Work project. Fascinating, super good guy, obviously brilliant in his lane. And that's what he talks about. It's not about the technical skills. That's great. You have your MBA in finance or whatever, way to go. But the leaders who are leading the companies that are winning and will win in the future are the high EQ companies. We had another guest on a few months ago, Nick Modi. I don't know if you know Nick.
I know Nick, of course, and he's an analyst. Yeah,
with RBC now. You probably know him at UBS. Nick is awesome. I love Nick. And we were talking about the title of the episode is "So You Want to Be in the C-Suite," and he's got a unique perspective, right? Because that's all he does is talk with CEOs and CFOs all day, and has for 20 years. So he's got a really interesting perspective. And what he said that sticks with me is, you don't want to be the smartest person in the room. You want to be the most aware person in the room. And then David, we keep harping back on David, but David talked about he wanted to listen first, kind of assimilate a little bit, and kind of make people feel like they were, part of the conversation. He wanted to make sure everybody felt heard. If you weren't going to be heard, you didn't need to be at the meeting. And I think his expression is, none of us is better than all of us. And I just thought that was so powerful. So the things that you're sharing, I think really resonate with all of that. You talked about attitude, and every day we get to choose our attitude and we get to choose our actions. Everything else could be going to crap. And things happen, right? I mean, I can't help wars and recessions and whatever, things happen. But every moment of every day, I get to choose my attitude and I get to choose my actions.
Yep.
And then kind of what happens is what happens.
Yep. That's great insight. I talk to my team about, are you a victim or are you a victor? There's a fine line between those two things, and it's what you choose. And, I use the expression a lot. I use this with my kids as well. Explain it to me, but do not use it as an excuse. I do not believe in excuses. I believe in explanations. And so don't, because if you use excuses, you become a victim. When you explain things, you become a victor. And I think, again, there's a fine line between, because clearly things happen like you just articulated, right? We're arguably in a recession. We have skyrocketing inflation, supply chain issues, war in Ukraine, you name it. There's craziness in the world. We still got to deliver the business. What do you do to do that? I mean, if we were in a foxhole in, World War II, you figure a way to get out, right? You're not just going to wait for something to fall on you. You want to find a way out of that. You're going to try to figure it out. So how do you become a victor and not be a victim?
Okay, so two things real quick. You would love an episode that we did with 3-star General Ben Hodges. He led the U.S. Army in Europe for 3 years. And what he talks about is, basically he's managing the objective. We are going to take that hill. How we take that hill may change. Like your truck may not have come. You still need to go take that hill and figure it out. So things may be happening around you that interrupted the plan. It doesn't change the objective. So the Korean won may have, devalued by half. Doesn't matter. You still need to go deliver on the business. The other thing that you said that I think, this is probably going to be a giant statement of the obvious, but Viktor Frankl and Man's Search for Meaning.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And I mean, it's like one of my all-time favorite books. And back to, this is somebody who was in the Holocaust and whose family died in it. And, finding meaning in challenging circumstances is kind of what sees you through the day. Otherwise, you just collapse. Yeah. Because if it's pointless and hopeless, then why are we here? But when you can find meaning in the challenge and benefit in it, then it's an endless tank that can drive you and sustain you. And to your earlier point, create that resiliency. Why are you so resilient? Because there's meaning in this for me, and I'm not going to give up on that meaning.
Yeah, and to build on that example, I love that example. In fact, because I use it. The other one is in the book Good to Great by Jim Collins. My
favorite business book.
Mine as well. The Stockdale paradox, right? He talks about the Admiral John Stockdale and how he was a POW, longest serving senior POW in Vietnam. And the John Stockdale I knew was the guy on the debates with Ross Perot in 1992, which wasn't the version that he was talking about in the book, unfortunately. But amazing guy. And he talked about the whole story around when Collins asked him who survived. Was it the optimists? He's like, no, actually no, because the optimists were like, I'm getting out on the 4th of July, I'm getting out on Thanksgiving, getting out on Christmas. When all those things went by, they weren't optimistic anymore, and they literally died. And he said, but the pessimists didn't make it either, because they were always so negative that the moment things continued to get worse, they just got worse and they perished. He said, I was a realist, and I always said, I'm going to take everything I learned here so that when I get out, I am going to be a better version of myself because of the experiences I've had through this. And those words echo in my ears all the time, no matter the situation I'm in, whether it's personal or professional, even if it's tough. I had a cancer scare. I'm not a scare, but I had stage 4 cancer 6 years ago. And it was just every step of the way from stage 2 to stage 3 to stage 4. And I remember I said, you know what? I told my wife, I don't know if I'm going to make it. Like, I just don't know. But I do know this, that whatever time I have left on this earth or whatever time we have together, I'm going to make the most of it. And I'm going to learn something from this, because when I get through the other side of it, I'm going to be better because of it. And it's a posture, right? It's a posture you take versus things happening to you. Yes, things happen to us all the time. And I wish I were better every day at being as good as I'm describing myself right now, but I fall short every day. But more times than not, I take the posture of, okay, like, first world problem, I'll figure this out. We will get through it. It will be a brighter day tomorrow. Like all the things, but if you talk it and you see it, you can become it, versus just letting those circumstances eat you alive, which they can in the business world in particular.
Well, I can't think of a better way to end, because that is a story of attitude and resilience. So absolutely. So, Kirk, this has been amazing. As a friend of mine says, better than good. So
thank you
so much. I've learned a lot. I just so resonate with so many of the things that you're sharing today. I know that the people who are listening, whether it was the kind of businessy technical stuff or some of these, values, character traits, things that are really life principles, where business is just a manifestation of some of these life principles. Very valuable. So thank you so much for sharing that and just sharing some of your day today. We know you're super busy right now, so it means a lot that you would join us. If people wanted to connect with you or connect with IRI plus NPD, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah. Our website, iriworldwide.com, is a place you can find out more about the company. and who we are. And then personally, I'm not much of a, honestly, a huge social media guy, but I have a Twitter handle at Kirk L. Perry. If you wanna follow me there or reach out to me there,
Awesome.
that would be cool.
Kirk, this has been phenomenal. Bless you for everything that you've been through, everything that you're doing, how you're impacting lives. I know that you're doing that, and it's just a pleasure to have you on today. So thank you.
That's been my pleasure, Bob. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, bye-bye.